What is the Pinoy love language called SUMBAT? Now, I call it the Pinoy love language. If you've been following me, I created an ebook many years ago in 2008 called Five Pinoy Love Languages. And if you're interested, I will link that. Now, I call it Pinoy love languages because it's uniquely how Filipinos, specifically from the motherland, from the Philippines, seek and express love. And sometimes they might be even irritating and very complex behaviors. And what I aim to just share is what might be underlying emotional need behind those very, some of them irritating behaviors. What is sumbat? Sumbat is when somebody did things for you and then suddenly you have a conversation, usually during an argument, where somebody would suddenly take out a list and kind of give you a litany of the things that they've done for you. So it can be a very confusing, irritating behavior. So, by the way, I'm Roanne. Thank you for listening to this video. I'm a licensed psychotherapist here in California. If you're using Sumbat to communicate, and let's say it's your mom, your uncle, you're doing that, try not to do that. Be more self aware. Okay, so people might use the strategy of Sumbat when they maybe you overgave and is that a word? You overgave, but now you're resenting because you're not getting the reciprocity that you're expecting. So maybe the key to that is to be more aware that if you are giving out of obligation, you are giving so that you can get love out of a relationship, to be mindful that sometimes giving can be also a sign of control. And then you might sumbat, give them a litany of the things you've done for them when you're not getting the outcome, the output that you're expecting. Sometimes people do sumbat to also show off like what they have done and makes them feel good about themselves. So try not to do that. Be mindful of why you are using that as a strategy. Um, those are just three, I think, that I mentioned. So be mindful if you're using it. At the same time, if there is a person that uses that as a strategy across their relationships, for instance, if you and your dad does that and then dad does it to other people, it is probably your father's strategy. However, if you notice that the person is not usually like that, but they kind of have been using that strategy on you, let me talk about what could possibly underlying an emotional need under Sumbat. And if you're in America, I think Filipino Americans get really confused with this. And let me share just a few, and then let me go back to that thought. Now, when somebody's doing the Sumbat, they might feel forgotten. Okay. So Filipino, especially in the motherland, they like physical proximity. They like that you're calling just for nothing, nothing transactional, but you're just kind of like, "Kumusta po? Ano kinain ninyong almusal? What did you eat for breakfast?" They that makes them feel that they are not forgotten. So they may feel forgotten, or this might sound like in the same breath, but they are not remembered. So when you remember someone, there is some type of repetition. It's not like you just call them and then you call again on other special occasions. So when they are remembered, there's some repetition. It's like there's some regularity around that exchange. So they feel forgotten, they're not remembered, they don't feel appreciated, and most, unless you come from a family that there's trauma, I have a article around that, but let me just separate. I'm just talking about just a healthy relationship, if you will, if somebody's using Sumbat as a strategy, is that they don't feel that you appreciate them. Now, you might know that, but it is not maybe verbally shared. So share with them, remember them, make sure they're not forgotten. And that's hard for the American culture because, again, as I shared, it's very linear. The expectation is that in a very individualistic culture, the expectation is if you did something, and there is some validity around this, is that don't do it. if if you know, like, you'll have to think about the exchange of it. In many ways, I think the golden rule is that that's true. But relationships are more complex than that. And most of the time, especially if it's a parent child, they're not really asking to be that the same thing be returned. Unless you keep forgetting them, then there's going to be a list. I've talked about this in the podcast about utang na loob, and that it usually takes the child, the Filipino American, by surprise. Oh my gosh, you have a list. That should have been your responsibility anyway. And in general, if your parent comes from a relatively healthy relationship or generation, there's no trauma. When somebody has trauma, sometimes that's um it makes it more complicated. It's coming from a place where there might be some wounding, and it's not your responsibility to tend to that, it's their responsibility. But just returning back to that thought, remember and don't forget them, appreciate them, not just one time. But there is some grief around moving to America. I'm a first generation. There's certain aroma, certain laughter, certain things that you could not completely access here. And of course, for my own children, I'm aware that's not their fault. I love that I'm able to give them more options, but it will be nice to be remembered, because you're only human. But I don't obligate my children. But the older generation do have more of, like, maybe exchange as far as leaving the country, or doesn't have to be a immigration process, but just some hardship, and just remember them. It actually goes a long, long way. And I hope you found this helpful. If you're interested in the Pinoy love languages, there's even a 7 Pinoy love language course. There's the ebook. I will link all of that, and go visit calamansijuice.com. That's with the K. And I have plenty of articles there that I've written. I hope you're well. Take good care. Ingat.